Michael Andrews, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs all the way from America's Pacific Northwest. Recently, we heard you talking about growing up and then leaving the Assemblies of God Pentecostal Church on the Cult Vault podcast. And so I thought it would be good to get you on the show to meet our audience and perhaps even reveal some new information about your almost 3 decades within this group. So how are you doing, April? I hear it might be snowing there soon. Is that right?
Fingers crossed. I hope it does. It looks like it's supposed to snow on Sunday, but you know, I like when it snows because it gets a little warmer. It's been like 10 degrees, so.
Today we're going to be talking about just what the Assemblies of God churches believe, some of their practices, and why you began to doubt and eventually left. First of all, for anyone who doesn't know, how would you describe the Assemblies of God?
Basically, it's Pentecostal, Charismatic, Evangelical. Like, those are pretty descriptive, accurate descriptive words. I believe it started with like a revival in California, and I looked it up, and it was in 1906 that this revival happened. Widely spread denomination in America, around the world, speaking in tongues, healing. If you ask Jesus into your heart, then you're saved and you're going to heaven. But if you don't, you're going to hell. The rapture, that's a big thing. Definitely want to get everybody saved so that when the rapture happens, we all go up to heaven and people aren't left here to be tortured, which is something they believe. Yeah, so growing up in a church like that, my church was pretty big. I want to say like 300, if not more. And we weren't the only AG church in the area, so sometimes the AG churches would like get together and do events together or conferences together. I was at church growing up like almost every day of the week. There was something going on, like for kids. So, my mom was in like the choir, she was in worship band, and then she was also like involved volunteering all the time, because you're not a good Christian if you're not volunteering all your free time.
I think you said she's still in. Is that right?
She's less in. Like, I don't think she really has a home church right now, but she like is still in the fact like she still thinks people are going to hell, and still believes in Jesus and thinks he's important. But she's less as involved in church as from when I was a kid, definitely. Like, she was there every day.
Well, you were born into the Assemblies of God, as we said, and your mom was very involved in the church and still is to some extent, as you said as well as church events. You attended public school. So how did a busy church life mix with your life as a public school girl?
Yeah, that was hard because I'm being raised in church, being told to evangelize. And the way that we're being taught is very like us versus them, very like we're the saved good Christians who like have Jesus in our hearts, and we know like the truth, and we know true love, and other people don't. And so that's scary to like go out into. And also because a lot of my other church friends were like either homeschooled or went to private Christian school, I definitely felt like, oh my gosh, it's almost even more important for me to like evangelize and be bringing unsaved people, because I have more opportunity than they do to meet unsaved people. But then like almost being afraid of people at school, afraid of, because they don't have God in their like lives, and like, what if they deceive me, or what if there's some temptation that's going to be introduced to me because I hung out with the wrong crowd, because I'm always being warned about, like, don't get involved with the wrong crowd. There's a pretty popular saying, like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future, that like a youth pastor would say, just to like, convict you a little bit, to be like, are your friends like good for you to be around, or are they like smoking weed or something, you know, or swearing too much or something. My mom was also pretty like strict about me even being allowed to be friends with people from school. So like I'm spending so much time with these people from school, but I'm not really allowed to connect with them, because what if they are not Christian and bad for me, and all of that. But then I'm also, on the other hand, supposed to be connecting with them in order to like teach them about Jesus. Yeah, so my dad never cared about Jesus or church stuff. He was like, you guys go ahead, I'm good. And so yeah, no, that was another thing, going to church and being taught that my dad was, you know, corrupt or not able to be a moral, good person who has like real love and freedom. Just being told that about him made me want to search for, like, is there something secret my dad's keeping like behind closed doors? Is he like actually shady because he's not saved? He's not been saved his whole life. He does not believe in God.
It's quite conspiratorial and presumptive, isn't it? You know, you don't know any of these things. It's just you're taught to presume them.
Yeah, I used to be like, is he cheating on my mom with his secretary? Is he, you know, does he have a secret porn addiction that the whole family just doesn't know about? Like, I used to think these things and even like try to look for evidence of them. I remember looking through his desk at his office once when he was out of the office and I was like waiting for him there. I remember like looking through his drawers to see if I could find like something that would be like incriminating. I didn't find anything. It looked like a boring office desk. But that's like brainwashing basically, because my dad, I'm seeing him every single day of my life. I'm experiencing him in real life as like a positive, loving person who doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't swear, doesn't like raise his voice on, you know, out of nowhere. You know, he's like trying to teach us right from wrong. And yet the church is telling me that because he's unsaved, he's like has these problems. Even though I'm not experiencing them, I'm still looking for them. That what I'm being told here is more true than what I'm experiencing in real life. Like, that's crazy to me. But yeah, that was a weird dynamic as well. Going to church too, being like, is your dad even like safe? Do you even have a dad? Like, from my other peers at church, because everybody just goes to church, their whole family, but we were the family that went without a dad. And being in Sunday school, like always raising my hand, like, yeah, I have a prayer request. My dad's not saved. And it would be like, oh my God, like, your dad's not saved, April. Like, we didn't know. Like, it was the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And even today, like, people who know me from the church are like, hey, we're still thinking about your dad, as if he has some kind of like terminal illness or something like concerning. Like, he's a good dude. He's okay.
So can you go into detail of some of the other beliefs that you remember from growing up in this church? So
because there's no dinosaurs in the Bible, dinosaurs aren't real. I remember my mom telling me to be wary of what I was learning in school. If they tried to teach me about evolution or about dinosaurs, that it was like not true, and that dinosaur bones were actually just elephant bones and giraffe bones that had like fused together over time. And like, I'm in first grade, so like, what do I know? Sounds like something that could happen, I guess. So I was like, I guess that's true. Dinosaurs not real. That's just other big animals' bones fused together. And everybody just is trying to spread this like Darwin lie just because they're bitter that they don't believe in God. Like, that's also a very victim mindset also, I feel like, is what's taught in the church. Hell House, and we did Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames every year, which was around Easter. That one was like little skits where it's like a group of people, but one of them isn't a Christian or something, and then they all like die in a car crash. And then the one who is a Christian but never told their other friends gets to go to heaven, and the other ones get like dragged to hell. They're screaming, and they're like, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us about the book of life? The one friend gets to go to heaven because she did accept Jesus into her heart. It's weird, but it's like to shame you into telling your friends about Jesus, and it definitely worked on me. I wrote a note, I remember, to my friend in my last year of high school. I had known her since kindergarten, And my last year of high school, I wrote a note saying like, hey, just so you know, there's a book of life and your name needs to be in it in order for you to go to heaven. And I need to tell you this. And here's how you can accept him into your heart. You just say, Jesus, please come into my heart and forgive me of all my sins. And the next day at school, she was like, I love all the notes you write me, April. I do. But that one I threw away, and I ripped it up and I threw it away. And I was like, not surprised, but also I was like, I guess the devil's working hard on her, like that she would be so mad to rip up my letter and throw it away, that it would like stir that in her, that must be like a demonic spirit over her. That's kind of what I thought. We also did Hell House a couple of years, but we couldn't sustain doing it every year, which is even crazier because you're like pretending that it's a haunted house. You're kind of like trying to trick the community into coming to your spooky Hell House. And then they get in there and it's like somebody's getting an abortion and it's like bloody and gory and there's like a demon like floating over them being like, yeah, kill your baby. Like,
there's a whole documentary about these hell houses. I remember seeing them. They are shocking, but it's just the way that they think that they have got this monopoly on morality.
They do think that. And I remember thinking that too. I remember thinking, wow, so I'm so lucky that I grew up in like the best church, the best denomination, the one that really translated the Bible the most accurately, as if I knew anything. Like, I'm 16, I've been indoctrinated my whole life, but I'm like so sure that I grew up in the best church there could be to grow up in. A lot of pride in being kind of like this elite person because I grew up being saved at such a young age. Like, wow, how lucky am I that I didn't have to fall into sin first in order to find Jesus.
And does the so-called purity culture affect the AG life at all?
So purity culture is a really big thing. Basically kind of been taught that if you're a girl, you need to cover yourself or be just extra aware of not having like a Jezebel spirit, which is like flirty or manipulative in any way. Even if you like know that a boy might be appreciating the attention, whatever, like that's like even bad. Like, guard your heart from all of this. Just hide yourself in a tower and your prince will find you. That's the most biblical, pure way to live. Definitely no sex before marriage. If you're dating before marriage, even that should be like really, like my best friend did not kiss her husband until their wedding day.
It's almost a mythical view of reality in a way, like a fairy tale view.
It really, really is. Do not show your cleavage. Do not, like, if you bend down and your shirt accidentally like goes up, like, did you do that on purpose? Were you trying to get boys to look at you? Those are things that get
And I take it the guys didn't get similar lectures about the way they were dressed.
Not as much, but I think there's damaging stuff as well with the guys because the way we're taught is like guys can't really control themselves. And to tell a young boy who's probably still figuring out like puberty and whatever that he's not able to control himself, like how's that helpful? How's that good?
He'll just go with it. He'll say, like, all right, if you say so.
Feel like I can maybe control myself, but if you're saying I can't, or there's this like thing in me that I'm gonna like always struggle with, like you're putting that truth on them. And I also believed it too because I'm not a boy and they're saying girls are better at controlling themselves, and I'm experiencing like, okay, when I get turned on, I can control myself. So that must be true. What they're telling me must be true. But then I would see my friends and I would like, no, I'd be like, no, I know they messed around on their date like last week because I found out that. But then they get married or something and everybody's like, oh, yay, bringing another baby into the church.
Now, you said that your church also was involved in speaking in tongues, and of course, your church is Pentecostal, and that's their shtick, really, isn't it? Speaking in tongues. So, can you tell us about those experiences?
Speaking in tongues is part of like one of their basic core beliefs. It's supposed to be evidence of the Holy Spirit. But I remember being like in junior high and in high school and still not having the gift of tongues, and every conference and every camp and every convention and every special event and even some random Sunday nights, whatever, they'd be like, who doesn't speak in tongues? And everybody knew, like, I don't speak in tongues yet. And they'd be like,
and for anyone who doesn't know, it's supposed to be an angelic language, or something which comes out of your mouth which nobody can understand, but a few people can maybe interpret.
Yes, it's like basic, like gibberish that comes out of your mouth repetitively, whatever. It's like blah 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 blah, and you're supposed to get it when you ask for it. That's basically it. And if you don't, keep asking. So that's what I was doing. I was like, I guess I better keep asking. So many of my friends had like been doing it since they were kids. I found out later they were absolutely faking it. Found out later a lot of people were faking things, and I'm like, oh, I guess you could do that. But I was so genuine. I thought everything was, why would these adults lie to me, a child? You know, there's all these people in my life telling me this is the truth. This is how the world works. And I was just like, of course it does. Like, of course that's true. Why wouldn't it be? But yeah, so I remember asking, and never getting it, being at camp and the speaker being like, okay, I'm going to say fire. And everybody who's asking, who has their hands up and is ready, like they're going to get it as soon as I say fire. And he'd be like, fire. And then I would not get it. And they'd be like, okay, but you know, you can't just think that God's going to like come and wiggle your tongue for you. You have to like actually try. And I'd be like so confused by that. Like, how am I supposed to speak something that I don't know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I can't move my mouth but not be telling my mouth what to say. This is a disconnect. Until eventually, after asking, this guest speaker was at our church, and he came and found me in the crowd of the altar call, because once again, he asked, who doesn't speak in tongues? And I was like, I guess I'm going to go up there again. He came down and he was like, listen, you already have the gift. You've already asked for it and you already have it. So I was like, whoa, how does he know that? And then he leaned down, whispered in my ear, and he was like, okay, you're going to repeat after me. And I was like, okay. And he just started speaking tongues in my ear. And I was trying to repeat after him, trying to keep up. I think I was just saying gibberish, and I could do it right now probably. And it just felt spiritual because of the music and the atmosphere and the lighting. And, you know, a lot of times I think back of like, oh, I felt the Holy Spirit that day or whatever. And now I'm like, no, I think I felt the bass guitar. Like, I think that might have been the bass. So yeah, that's my speaking in tongues journey. There's an episode of The Liturgist, which is a podcast that is about speaking in tongues. And if you are wondering more about speaking in tongues, it's a really good resource. It talks about like the science behind it and like what your brain does. And like the host of that, they came out like kind of inconclusive, I guess. Like some of them were like, it still encourages me, even though I disconnect it from any belief in God, I still practice it. And apparently it can be a practice that people get encouragement out of, without it being weird and Pentecostal. So that's something.
So it's a phenomenon, but not necessarily a supernatural one. Right.
Yeah. Like, I guess it's just kind of like shutting your brain off and just being like, saying these nonsense words can be kind of like a meditative, soothing, kind of a clearing practice.
Well, it was around the age of 16 that you had an experience in Christian camp that led you to become a missionary for the church. So tell us about that.
Every first Sunday of the month is Mission Sunday. I'm pretty sure that's for all AG churches. And so every first Sunday of the month, we would hear stories in children's church, and in the big church as well about missionaries all around the world and like miracles that had happened for them. And so when I was 16, I was at summer camp, and a random guest speaker from another state, he pointed at me in the middle of the crowd, and he was like, "You, girl, you are a missionary." And I was like felt so like God sees me. Finally, I've been called. Like, oh my God, it's happening. I remember going back to like my dorm bunk bed or whatever, and like writing in my journal and being like, it happened. I'm called to be a missionary. Oh my goodness, I have a purpose. I have something in my life to direction in my life. You know, because you're being told your whole life about like people being called and about like God having a plan just for you. And so the next year after that, I ended up living in China with a missionary family for 1 month, because that's as long as the visa would allow. And after that, I ended up signing myself up for ministry school, because I was like, the only thing I know is fact, is that I'm supposed to be a missionary.
After your mission, you returned to the States and went to ministry school. You studied the Bible 24/7, and you kept your thoughts in journals, lots of journals. But it wasn't long before quite a few doubts about it all began to creep in. Isn't that right?
So Master's Commission is a school of ministry that is affiliated with AG churches. So the AG church will be kind of like the host church, and then they'll have a program that's like with their church. The program is run kind of by itself, but like if they're serving or involved or whatever, they do things together. So if they put on a program, or they want to help do something with the kids or something like that, it's like connected with their host church. You could say I should have looked into it more, I guess, but I was like, by faith, I'm going to just join ministry school. I'm not going to worry about what it is. And it was essentially a cult. They basically controlled my life there. The first thing you do is, one of the first things you do is this teaching called Undercover by John Bevere. And you could look it up. And it's basically a teaching like, hey, if God put a leader in your life, that leader is essentially God. And so if that person says jump, that's God saying jump. And you want to obey God, don't you? Like, you want to be a good, obedient Christian, right? We did 10 weeks of that right off the bat, which is pretty controlling, right? We did another teaching right off the bat that was about being like Jesus, which is basically like be a servant always and never be offended. And if you are offended, then that's probably you. You're the issue, because you allow the offense to be in your heart. If you cause that to come out of you and manifest in any sort of way, you're causing division, and that's what the devil wants. So don't do that. All of these things is basically like, hey, don't ever say anything is wrong, like never complain, always serve. And it was a 24-hour school, so you're living there and you're just learning about the Bible, learning about the Assemblies of God theology, and serving just all the time, whether that's cleaning toilets or painting nurseries or going to a school and like cleaning there and doing it to be like a witness for Jesus. We volunteered at a lot of like high school dances, but only so that we could like secretly be praying under our breath the whole time to like bring the Spirit of God into this like dark place. My first year at the ministry school, they said, okay, everybody, get into the van and bring a jacket. And we were like, where are we going? What are we doing? And they were like, get in the van, bring a jacket. That's all they told us. And so we got in the van. Some of us brought jackets, some of us didn't, whatever. And they drove us up a mountain, and then they dropped us off, said, everybody get out. And they threw out 2 tents, and they drove away. We're on the top of a mountain alone with 2 tents. We're all like 18, 19, 20. And we were like, we didn't know when they were coming back, we didn't have any food. We were just like, what in the world? So everybody started freaking out. We tried to put the tent together. One of the tents was broken, so we only had one tent. We were like, can we all fit in here if we have to stay here overnight? There was like a little shack that somebody found that they were like, we could break into there. We could see if they have like fire. Or, you know, one of the girls called her dad and was like, Dad, I'm on top of a mountain. I don't know what to do. Can you come get me? And then an hour later, the leaders came back and picked us up and brought us into like our little meeting room. And they were like, so guess you guys all failed the test. And we're all like, what? And they're like, yeah, one of you called your dad and one of you broke into a thing. Like, we all had to like debrief the sins of not trusting that our leaders were going to come get us in an hour. That of course our leaders would never put us in danger. That of course we weren't going to freeze to death out there. It was all a test to, you know, teach us about ourselves and about our relationship with God and our relationship with our leadership. They didn't tell us anything. And it was like a thing on obedience. Like I told you guys to grab a jacket. So those of you who didn't have a jacket, like that's your fault for not listening and obeying instruction. You don't need to know why. You just need to know that we said to do something. And also the fact that we're essentially just working for the church. We're doing yard work. We're cleaning toilets. We're painting walls. We're building fences. We're like, it's kind of a way to get a bunch of 20-year-olds who are able-bodied people together to get a bunch of grunt work done for the church. That's a big use of Master's Commission, although they say it's for discipleship, and sure. But yeah, and you're paying to be there to do that. Before Master's Commission, I would have doubts, but I would be like, you know, maybe I just don't fully understand everything yet. Maybe I'm going to still learn. Like, I didn't understand what the Trinity was. I knew that they told us little cute stories about, like, oh, if you take an apple, there's the seeds and there's the skin and there's the apple part. Or if you take an egg, there's a yolk and there's a shell. Whatever. And like one of those is the Trinity and one of those is the Holy Spirit. Whatever. Okay. I still was like imagining in heaven like this 3-headed blob person and being like, how are they one person but 3 people? I don't understand this at all. But I also felt like shame about not understanding things because I'd been in church my whole life and been saved since I was 5. So like I should know these things. So when I went to Master's Commission, I finally was in a place where I could ask these questions and I could really learn, and it was part of my homework to find this out and be able to learn it to the point where I could tell it to other people and, you know, really understand all this stuff. Like Adam and Eve were in the garden, right? And then they sin, and God like clothes them with like a fur from an animal. And we're told, okay, look at that detail, you guys. That was actually the first sacrifice because God always needs a sacrifice for sin. And then throughout the whole Old Testament, people are sinning and sacrificing, like cutting goats up and cutting birds' heads off and whatever, right? The New Testament, God's like, hey, good news, everyone. I'm actually going to give you my son to kill instead. The ultimate sacrifice, the purest lamb. Praise the Lord. I'm going to solve all your problems. You're not going to have to sacrifice things on altars anymore because of Jesus. Yay. And then like thinking about that and being like, okay, but like you are solving a problem that you create. Like you're the one who made the sacrifice rule in the first place, God. So now you're coming in being like, I solved that. That was a rule that I made like with my own son. Like it's still like, why did it have to be that way? Yeah, so that always, like, bothered me. Like, this is the rules that God made, but why? And it's so hard still, and people are still going to hell, and people still don't understand it. Like, why is it this way? And nothing is, like, tangible. It seems like it could be. Why isn't it? Just, like, this belief that, like, once you ask Jesus into your life, like, you have to be forever thankful that he died on this cross for you. Like, okay, I guess that's how it works. That still doesn't make a ton of sense. Still, even though I had all these doubts, I really struggled with giving myself permission to doubt. And that was where, like, a lot of people who will tell their deconstructing stories or whatever will be like, oh, it's because, like, my gay friends never got accepted, or because of my own sexuality, or things like that, or mental health, I don't know, other things like that, where they're like, I went through a real thing and the church acted this way and that's why. But, like, for me, I just believed all of it. I was 25 or whatever, and I was still like, yeah, gay people are going to hell. That's what the Bible says. And I thought that was true. I'd been taught, like, it was a perversion, and I thought that was correct. I believed everything. So when I finally was ready to give myself permission to ask questions that I never, ever let my brain go there, is when I started, like, peeling all this off and being like, wait, for real, hold up, this really doesn't make sense. And now I'm letting it, like, bother me, and I'm letting that myself go on a path to really, like, look through this bathwater and be like, is there even a baby in here, or is it all just shit? Like, you know. And also because I, like, put myself in a program where I was there till my mid-20s, getting myself brainwashed probably didn't help. But it took me a while to finally, I actually just started listening to podcasts is what it did. And hearing other people around the world's point of view. There's this podcast called Oh Dear God. Mm-hmm. And it's people who are just telling their stories of how the church hurt them. And at the end of the podcast, they read a letter to the church, and they say, like, if the church was listening, here's what I would like to say. And there was one where, like, this guy's family was from Africa or something, and he was like, you don't even know the culture, like, how much you, just by saying what you're saying, is offending, like, how I was raised and the culture I was raised in. Like, the fact that we're so sure in the AG church and in, like, evangelical white churches in America, like, how true we are and how right we are, and how we're like, yeah, we'll go to another country and tell them what's correct, is so, like, entitled and, like, arrogant. Funny that the church that you were raised in is the right church. How likely is that the church you were born to believe in is the right church? Are you sure about that? Have you looked into it? But that's not anything we're ever meant to consider, is it?
Well, despite being heavily involved in the church, you decided it was time for you to leave. So tell us about this journey.
It's really gradual. Like, I came back to the church I was raised in after the ministry school I was in literally fell apart. It's a whole thing. The pastor was, like, stealing money from the church, and yeah, it was bad. Got shut down. I was feeling like, man, I would have worked there for the next 10 years for free, because I was working there for free. Obviously I was. I got involved in the worship team. I would, like, hope that somebody would, like, see me on the stage and be like, oh, a single girl I can marry. I was kind of, this is really juvenile, but I was kind of hoping that somebody would marry me, and then I wouldn't have to, like, worry about anything anymore. Like, my mission could be being a wife. Like, my missionary could be being a mom or something. Like, I'm missionarying these children. I don't know. I was just like, I wouldn't have to have a calling anymore necessarily, because it would be known that my role was more serving my husband. So that's kind of where my mind was. I was like, I guess I hope that happens, but then that did not happen. Eventually, I kind of went from serving on, like, 3 worship teams to serving on 1 to serving, like, only once a month to quitting that, and then and going only to church when I was on the worship team. And people still don't really know, don't know how I feel. Like, this would all be absolute news to them. My own family doesn't really know. So when you say, like, when you finally left, that's putting it in a way. I just kind of, faded into nothing. And I'm 33. I'm, like, a kind of a island person anyway. So, but yeah, so I think I feel so much more confident and, like, better about not having to, it's such an energy of having to bring this invisible God into like my everyday practical life, and like look for him everywhere and wonder all the time. Like letting that go is just, it's like better. I don't have to worry all the time about like what he might think, or what demonic spirits might be attached to people. And as far as like leaving, it's not like I was like, hey guys, peace out, F you. I kind of faded away, and even after that, just slowly would try to like untangle the way I thought about things, and like heaven and hell, does that even make sense? And if it was real, how would it even look? And seeing what other people believe about it, and being like, you know what, I think I can let go of that.
Well, today you are out of the church and you work as a graphic designer. You write about your experiences and do podcasts. So would you definitely say that you are happier now that you have left the Assemblies of God?
It's crazy because in church, you're like being told this is how you get to real freedom, is having Jesus living inside of you. He's the only one who can like set you free. It's a big selling point at any altar call. Like, do you want to experience freedom today? And yet when I let go of all that shit, I literally experienced a freedom that I never experienced before. It was genuinely like when you come home from school and you have like a ton of books in your backpack and you're putting that down and you kind of feel like, oh, I was carrying a thing and it was heavy, is what I felt like. All just this mental energy of filtering everything through, like, what does God think about this? What does the Bible think about this? Like, what is this person a safe person? Do I need to evangelize to this person? Like, having to judge every single person to where they're standing, like, with God, because it's also your job to, like, save them, or either save them or be worried about them or something. Like, instead of just, now I meet a person and I can take them for the amazing human that they are and who they've made themselves to be. And it's so much better. It's such a better way to live. My friends who are LGBTQ plus, like, I also was like, are they going to hell? Like, they seem very cool and like nice people, but like I wasn't sure. And now I'm like, oh, these people are amazing, and of course I love them, and like, of course that's ridiculous that they would go to hell just because of how they feel. Being worried about, like, there's like an evil spirit on people or connected to things, or even like some songs or movies or whatever, because that movie has a certain thing in it, it's demonic. All of that. Let all of that go. Like, there's so much of it that you realize you're just holding on to and being like worried about all the time. And yet life with God is supposed to be like the most like worry-free, like put your anxieties onto the Lord because he cares for you, is a legit verse. Do not lean on your own understanding is a really big thing. And like, do not trust your own heart is another thing, because your heart, there's literally a verse in the Bible, your heart is deceitful above all things. So up to think about my own heart and my own mind deceiving me all the time is how I was raised. And like, now as an adult, I like have a hard time being like, no, girl, you can trust yourself. You can trust what you're feeling in this moment and give yourself the boundaries that you need. That's allowed. Like, that I grew up feeling like that was not allowed. And that's a big thing too that helped me let go, is like, is this actually helping me? Is this actually beneficial? And I think we're raised to not think in that way, because that's selfish or prideful, or not putting God first. If you're thinking, what's helping me, you know, that's putting yourself first. You have rights, and you can say, this is not helping me have a better, happier life, and that's okay.
Well, it's been quite a journey for you, April, and I'm so glad that you've come out the other side and are in a much happier place now. I will leave links to your social media in the description below. And all that's left to say is thanks once again for coming on to Talk Beliefs.
I know I'm still on the process of figuring it out, how it affected me, and yeah, thank you for letting me talk about it.